the block 1 and block 2. Anyone recall what block 1 and block 2 was about? If we call it with one word, we're starting with what's development stages there in the block 1 and then block 2. So during block 1, exactly. Shukran, Sadia. So we'll start with analyzing block 1 and then we're moving to design. Now in this block, we'll move to having bigger pictures, the architectures and the general. So to lead us in the final unit for testing, we are not going to go into details, but we will highlight some important concepts in software engineering. يعني راح نغطي كل شيء في هذا الكورس يخص software engineering about the architectures and the productions, but we then just highlight some concepts. So we will study during this unit about, we will cover 3 concepts: architectures, pattern, and reuse. I'll just try to just give brief introductions, like general concept, what they are before I start. When we're talking about the architectures is having a big pictures of all the module, all the concepts we have it, and how our, let's say, software is going to be built. And then the pattern, if you recall from the kindergarten, sometimes they're asking us to draw patterns. Like I have triangle, circle, triangle, triangle. Then I'm going to have again triangle, circle, triangle, triangle. So this is a pattern. شغلة تتكرر in the same way. So this is what we're going to see in software engineering. We have a set of things. We'll explain what they are. It's repeated in the same pattern. بنفس النمطية. Like you are waking up in the morning, you're getting a coffee, you're doing the same things again and again. And reusable, this is a very important concept for software engineering. You don't need to build everything from scratch every time you're designing or you're building a software. And especially if you're working with a company, not every time you are building a software, you're building everything from scratch. For example, if you're always building a website for e-commerce, أنا من شركة دائما أعمل مواقع إلى الشركات على أساس إنهم يبيعوا. What are the main things that I can reuse it again and again? شغلات أقدر أستخدمها in the different websites. That's e-commerce websites I'm talking about. As إيش? الpayment, exactly رغد. This is one part. Searching, filtering. There's a lot of concepts. Putting things on the bags. So هذه الأشياء كلها راح تكون تتكرر.
يعني ما فهمت.
عفواً؟
أقول دكتورة ما فهمت. كيف يعني؟
إيش ما فهمتي إيش بالضبط؟ أي concept؟ الريوز؟
السؤال يعني.
أي سؤال؟
اللي تو قلتيه.
أنا سألت الآن أنت لما يكون عندك موقع، أنت تشتغلي في شركة وأنت جالسة تبني مواقع إلى الإي كوميرس. إيش الأشياء اللي reuse it again and again، يعني تستخدميها نفسها لما تبني أي موقع. So for example مثل ما تفضلت رغد البيمنت، لما تيجي تبني موقع لبيع الملابس you need a payment at the end. If you are selling a book you need a payment at the end. If you're selling a computer you need a payment at the end. So الكومبوننتس اللي خاص بالبيمنت نفسه ما راح تعملي له implementation كل مرة، خلاص هو موجود عندك and every time you will use it. So this is what about we're talking about a reuse. We'll talk about an ارسال, but I'm just refresh your mind about the main concept. So let's get started now. So when we're talking about engineering in general, not only in a software engineering, even when we're talking about any other engineering, you can use the same concept. So like in civic engineering, in architectural engineering, all of those is using those concepts about you having structures and you have a reused. Structure يعني كيف راح أنظم الأشياء. اللي أخذوا 269 ال data structures, we having a data structures, how we organizing the data. Now we are organizing the element for software engineering. So هذا معنى structures, تنظيم, Okay, reuse, we're going to use things again and again. So for software architectures, we concern about different elements, and we need to understand. I'm not sure if my pointers. Okay, it's showing there. Okay, I have a different elements, and I need to see their external visibility and probabilities and their relationships. So I already designed different diagrams. I had different modules, and I have all other things اللي ما غطيناها خلال هذا الكورس. يعني لو حد خصص later في software engineering, you will see a lot of other elements. Those elements, all of them together, gonna to create software architectures. يعني software architectures أهم من أن يكون عندنا فقط diagrams or only modules. Now what we need to know, we need the structures. طب كيف راح يتربطوا مع بعض؟ أنا عندي element 1, element 2, element 3, how they are related to each other, what their relationships between one to another, and how they are visible to each other. كيف كل واحد فيهم يشوف الثاني. This is how we represented with the software architectures. تمام? So then we need to know that architectures interacting with the requirements. We are not doing anything with software an assumption of what the customer needs. We always putting in our mind ايش المستخدم اللي حابه, and then we design things, we analyze things, we doing the architectures based on our requirements, and then this is what requirements, what's the customer's name. Okay, so this is what we are looking on here, and then we're moving to a reused concept for software engineering. And this is exactly what I just explained at the beginning. لما يكون عندنا محتوى معين, يعني إحنا نطور application again for kids. I already designed and developed a kids game, and I know the main elements, such as at the beginning they get to have an account. They supposed to check the things like such as the password, the email, whatever. We have the same process again and again, so that this theory used. This is the very simple example. When we go with detail software engineering, it's more detail. بس على أساس إنكم تفهموا الكونسبت للريوز. أن نفس الفكرة تستخدموها again different website or different application. So we're going to have it. علشان كذا we will study a different architecture style. يعني بعد كذا الآن إحنا ناخذ بهذا اليونت we'll see different architectures. إيش يعني different architectures؟ طرق تنظيمية مختلفة. And then based on how we gonna to organize the elements. Those architectures is only one part of the design of the software. يعني هي ما تتكلم عن الديزاين كله. هذا الاركتكتشرز هي فقط جزء. And then it's dealing with the elements, the pattern, as I just explained at the beginning. So let's move on. When we are, yes. So in this section, we will look to software architectures and how they are interacting. So what is architectures exactly? What's the definition? Is the structures or structures of the systems? Structures يعني الطريقة تنظيمية, which compresses software elements that externally visible properties to the elements and the relationships among them. لو جينا, if we just would like to emphasize a set of keywords, and if you can tell me, let's say 3 keywords in هذا definition that is going to help you the full definition. Let's assume you get it في الexam. 3 كلمات, if you know it, you can build the definition. تقدر تعرفوها. What they are? 3 main keywords. I'm going to tell this the first one. Structure. Then what else? I'm talking about a structure. طريقة تنظيم what? It's element. Okay. Still. Okay, you're saying more than one idea, more than 3, but let's say we will have just يعني أنا بس أساس وقت اللي تذكروا you trying to minimize the effort في نفس الوقت وقت يجيكم any question such as this you can build on top of it. Relationships ممتاز رغد. So we thinking about I have a structured طريقة تنظيمية تخص مين element. Good. And then what's important for us is visibility. Visibility between mean elements. So I'm talking about structures, visibility, relationships. So عندي structures كيف راح أرتب الelements, visibility كيف يشوفوا بعض, and the relationships with how they interacting with each other. Okay, so this is what architectures mean. An example of an architectures, we will see one example here, and then we will go in detail about other examples. One of the famous example when we having a website, so we having something called LAMP, which is related on Linux as L, Apache, web server, MySQL, and PHP. إيش هذا بالضبط؟ This is tell you when you're having a website. So a popular architecture of a website is a LAMP stack. Now, if إن شاء الله بتوصل لمشروع التخرج, when you go to the final project, to having a website, you don't building things in top of your mind. There is a set of architectures that's already there, and you just get to reuse it. راح نرجع نستخدمها مرة ثانية. مثل هذه الاركتكتشرز what is called LAMP. يعني أنت لو الجهاز اللي جالسين تستخدموه لينكس راح تقول I have a client اللي هو whatever I'm putting my web browser on as a client, or sorry, I have a web browser, and then I have my server اللي حقيقة لو أنتم جالسين تعملون مشروع التخرج راح يكون also in your PC or your laptop. So if you're having Linux, it's depending what's the operating system you are using. And then you're having a web server. What's the rules of the web server is making a connections between your web browser and the databases. So we're having a web server to take care of all those steps. And then you have the languages you use. So if you are using PHP, it's going to be PHP. It can be also Python, it can be Java, it can be Perl, whatever language is there. And then we have the back end اللي هي databases. In this cases, it's MySQL. This is not only the cases. Anyone know any another database in addition to MySQL? MySQL is one type of the database. في حد عنده فكرة عن نوعية ثانية من الداتابيسز؟ Anyone deal with Google databases? في حد يستخدم Google database or at least heard about it? No? It's a very common that many of you is using during the final project. I don't know what's the, sorry, I just get MongoDB, non-SQL good, PostgreSQL exactly, ممتاز أمينة. But usually using Firebase exactly, ممتاز فيصل. Yes, so this is depending. So the name of the acronym is based on what you're using. فمثلا لو فيصل استخدم الفايربيز بدل ما نحط الام راح تكون اف. سعدي يستخدم مثل MongoDB, it's gonna to still m. If we're using PostgreSQL, it's gonna to be p. So this is how it is. Again, the same things with the operating system. If I'm using Linux, it's going to be L. Using Mac operating system is going to be M. So this is just an architecture. Like in the same architecture is the same. They are the relationships, and then client is going to connect to web server, and then web server will connect with the database and so on. This is how it is going to be there. But we're going to talk about one type of architectures. حقيقة later we will list all of them. But they just would like to show you an example قبل ما يدخلوا باللist. They will explaining a very famous architectures, what is called peer-to-peer. The peer-to-peer concepts, that mean I have a client who can directly connect with another client without having a server in the middle. One of the concepts or a software is used there is Skype. I don't know, anyone's using Skype or heard about Skype, or it's too old that you didn't hear about it. في حد سمع عن السكايب من قبل؟ Yes, no, maybe. Anyone? So the Skype is actually, okay, good. So the Skype is actually that you can make a call. So when we're making a call, that's you having a direct connection between one node to another. So you as a caller, the one who's going to make the call, you are representing a node, and then you are directly connecting with another. So in this case, we call it peer-to-peer. The peer now is the one who's going to call it. Like recently, this is an old architectures, but in fact, this is not the only part that we have it for Skype. ايش يعني architectures؟ طريقة تنظيمية. So we see this is the same architectures. We will see it in a different software. مش فقط السكايب اللي يستخدمها. ممكن نشوف software ثاني يستخدموها. We will see it soon. Plus, this is one thing. Another thing, the same software, it can have multi architectures, يعني mixed of architectures. So مثلا في السكايب it has to peer as the main core architectures. الفكرة الأساسية إنه يخلي الناس البير يعني الناس يتواصلوا مع بعضهم direct. However, at the end لازم يكون عنده client server architecture. إيش يعني client server؟ client يعني مستخدم. والserver that you're going to put everything at the end on it. راح explain the client server in details. لكن the client server is more centralized. يعني راح يكون عندي center اللي هو السيرفر and then the client contact with it. طب how many type of architectures إلى الآن شرحنا؟ We explaining peer to peer. We explaining in general. We're talking about the client server. So it is this architectures of the website, but we are not going to talk about it in sort itself في examples اللي جايين. A third type, what is called pipe and filter, or another type of it, it's a data flow. إيش يعني data flow? You having something مثل الداتا, for example, راح ناخذها الآن كtext, and you can think about it on anything. ممكن يكون database, ممكن it's coming from a website, coming from an application, like a part of it. We're going to see you having a text, ملف, what is called elements.txt. This text has a set of words, موجود داخله مجموعة من الكلمات. The first filter element, it's asking you to find str, find string, /bp. What is that? Does it mean? أوجد لي الكلمات اللي تبدأ بحرف P. Find the string that is starting with the P. So if I have a list of words, I'm going to filter them. راح أستخرج فقط الكلمات that is starting with the P. Then I'm going to pipe. إيش يعني pipe? I'm going to send it to another filter. Now I'm going to do another filter. Find a string that end /e, يعني end with um. So all the words that is starting with the P, I'm going to filter them again. راح أرشحهم مرة ثانية, أفلترهم مرة ثانية, واختار only الكلمات اللي تنتهي بالUM. And then the last filtration, I'm not going to cut out. ما راح أستقطع منهم. I'm going to sort them. So I end up with those 3 words. So let's assume I have 10 words at the beginning في الملف اللي اسمه elements. استقطعت only الكلمات اللي تبدأ بالبي, الكلمات only that end with the UM, and then I sort them. Okay, so this what is called data flow architectures. Okay, now we will have a concept من البداية. If you recall, قلت لكم anything we are doing it, حنا دائما البوصلة تبعنا مين? To doing anything for software engineering is a user requirement. So we always thinking, what's the customer need to do the things? Now, based on these explanations, we having some relationships between the architectures and the requirements. So if I having a set of high requirements, يعني تفاصيل كثيرة. It's showing a level of details. It is really related to the architecture's how it's represented. This is explaining a concept of a twin peak module. إيش twin peak module? They said at the beginning, خلينا نشوف بأعلى الهرم at the top of this requirements, it has a low level of details. نجي إلى المثال when you ask him to build a house. At the beginning you said, I would like to have a 3-room and a kitchen and a first floor. And that's it. This is a low detail. طب what it will be the specification of the architectures? كيف راح يكون الاركتكتشرز؟ The specification is going to be low as well. ما راح يكون عندي تفاصيل في الاركتكتشرز تبعي. لكن whenever I go with the details in higher requirements, it's going to give me more detail, تفاصيل أكثر. I would like to have in a first floor, whenever I'm entering the kitchen, next to it, I just have one door, and then I'm going to have a living room. The 2 rooms going to be next to each other, and I am going to have a bathrooms in the middle of them. I give more detail. لما أعطي تفاصيل أكثر, higher details, more detail, it is going to give us more specification of the architectures. So this is what's representing the twin peak module, okay? So we're going side by side between the requirements and the architectures. But based on my explanation, if you remember, the agile approach as what you get في midterm, if you just would like to give an explanation why we're using the agile approach usually as a keyword again. The agile approach is usually related to what or associated with what? من كل الأشياء اللي تكلمنا على the agile approach when we're having a requirement, the agile approach when we use a use case, the agile approach. So as an agile approach, we emphasize couple of things. إيش كانت؟ Smart, ممتاز, flexible, good. What else? Smart, يعني we don't need to put everything. Flexible, you can change it, مثل ما تفضلت أمينة. What also? Divided to, no. It's not related to the agile. That was divided, it's about the modelizations. We're talking about the agile light, ممتاز سعدية. Light يعني شغلة خفيفة. الآن تشوفوا أنتم على أساس تتذكروا الagile symbol. لما تقولوا شخص ما شاء الله عليه ذكي، يعمل الأشياء بطريقة سريعة خفيفة وصحيحة، لأنه ما يركز على الأشياء اللي that's not important. This is example of an agile when you think about it. So fast, flexible, light, all this is going to give it to us when we're talking about an agile approach. So, and based on this explanation, the agile approach, let's take a look to hear it now. That's practical emphasis, adapting and dealing with the decision for as long, delaying a decision as long as possible. يعني يقول لك طيب ما راح ندخل في التفاصيل. I'm doing a part. الagile يقول لك خليني أخلص جزئية. Going to move to another. بدون ما أتكلم عن التفاصيل كثير. But this concept, some participations of the agile approach, they said maybe this is going to go against the architectures. يجي بضد الاركتكتشرز. ليش؟ لأن الاركتكتشرز usually going to give us a big pictures. We need to know what details. We need to do relationships. فإحنا نبغى نبني الأشياء بالتفاصيل. الagile يبغى يخليها بسرعة, flexible, changing. We are not going to do with details now. So all of those concepts, some participants of agile, they think they're going to go against of each other. In fact, they are not. I'm going to give you an example. So the explanation of what I just said is there. Real life example. ممكن تسمعوا عن الناس usually they love planning things, especially at the beginning of the year. They're putting a plan during this month. We will do this, and then they go sometimes in details. During the week, we will finish this task, that task, and this task. And during the same day, from this hour to this hour, I'm going to doing my homework. From this hour to this hour, I'm going to have a break. This hour to this hour, I'm going to skill up my upskill myself in XYZ area. راح أطور نفسي في المكان الفلاني. This is الآن نفكر فيها كالarchitectures اللي هي الفكرة الكبيرة. طيب يجوا لك أشخاص يقول لك طب أنا ليش why I'm doing all this? I'm gonna to put everything in my mind وراح أخلصها يوم بيوم. طب الآن logically when you sit with each of those you said put a balance between putting all the details كل التفاصيل and doing things fast. So this is exactly what is said here. In fact, the architecture will agile, they are not incompatible. In fact, they are working with each other when you're doing them in a balance. يعني لما نجي على موضوع اني احط الجدول كله بالتفصيل في بداية السنة، انت ما تقدر تحط everything every day لأيام السنة كلها what you're going to do hour by hours. In the same time, it's not good نخليها على البركة and we're doing things daily. يلا أنا أجلس اليوم إيش راح أعمل, which is not going to work. The same things with the architectures will agile. The architectures, you having the big pictures, the elements how they are related to, and the agile doing things in a smart, fast way. You putting the architectures and you follow the agile as you go with the process of design, implement, you develop and improve الاركتكتشرز تطورها. بنفس الشيء نرجع إلى مسألة الخطة السنوية. وإحنا طالعين في الخطة السنوية جالسين نعمل الأشياء. طيب لقينا شغلة ما تنفع. We said we're going to spend this time of amount of hour during this month. وبعد كذا اكتشفنا أن عندنا اختبارات. We're going to change it. Now let's back to our example اللي هي الاركتكتشرز والagile. So what they said here, we're going to think about two peak module. You starting with a low requirement. نبلش بأشياء بسيطة والarchitectures راح تكون less specific. We will increase the requirement specific details and then we will increase the specification of the architectures as we go. So the agile participation consider architectures to be important of the complex project. حقيقة هذه نفس الفكرة للناس اللي يكونوا عايشين حياتهم يوم بيوم ما يقدروا يبنوا خطة بعيدة المدى. كل حياتهم طوارئ. All the day عندي exam, I have a homework and that's it. ما في خطة تطويرية للذات أبدا. However, that's having things at the beginning of the year, you have a plan and you develop it as you need. The same things بالضبط بالarchitectures. You have a big pictures, you put the things because it's a complex. But then you develop it because it's a complex, it has high elements, you put everything. And then الelement اللي خاصة بالagile as a value هي اللي راح تشتغل as a support to that architectures to develop it and update it. Okay, so now let's summarize this. How will architectures contribute in this way? كيف راح يفيدنا طيب الarchitectures لما أحط البلان all of it together? It's good for the communications either between the developer and the client or between the other stakeholders in the software, and also to design a good documentations. لما تبنى مشروع, let's assume you're working with a company, you are not working by your own. You're supposed to go, let's assume you are working here. As you have a staff who's working to develop the parts or working with the parts dealing with a web server. And you have someone else working with a database. حتى في مشروعكم التخرج. When we're doing this architecture, you know now that you need a documentation related to web server. And you need a documentation related to database. And also you need to know that there is a communications and relationships between them. This is going to help you design everything related to your system correctly. All of this is feeding a good sequence and subsequence to development circle. فإحنا راح نبدأ بقطعة بسيطة لما يكون عندنا low requirement والspecification low راح يبدأ development with a part. And then we get a higher requirement, higher specification we will feed it as a seed إلى development circle أساس إنه هو يكملوا فيها. طيب الآن if you think about the architectures and two type of requirement that we already studied اللي هي functional and non-functional. You think which one is harder to build architectures for? الfunctional ولا non-functionals؟ مين اللي راح يكون harder to design the architecture for? الfunctional ولا non-functionals؟ You already having the answer in front of you, but like, let me see. Here with me. مين اللي راح يكون أصعب علي إني أرسم architecture له؟ Exactly, and non-functional. ليش non-functionals? And non-functionals, it has more details, and it's not gonna to give you a general concept. So that's why we can multiply architectures that meet a functional requirement, but will not be equal when we come to non-functional requirement. Why? Because أول شيء الfunctional is higher importance, but non-functional, it has stronger restrictions. I can highlight this as well if you would like to. And this is important to consider. So when we're thinking about functional representing the architectures, important, more important. لكن في non-functional is strong restriction, عنده قيود أكثر. Okay, so that's why it is going to be hard to explain. Now we're going to talk about the characteristic of the architectures. We're going to have four elements or characteristic of the architectures when we have it. We need to think about the quality, the core features, the constraints, and the environment. The quality, how good is my architectures? What are the main functions I'm going to do? So this is going to be core features. The constraints, if there is any restrictions I'm going to have. And the environment, anything external, خارج الارchitectures تبعي. So let's starting with the description and the example. So the quality, for example, as what we said before, equality is related to non-functional requirements, such as security, reliability, availability, إنه هو يكون secure، دائما موجود، خاصة بإنه قديش برنامجي كويس، قديش مش كويس، قديش has high quality، يعني إنه هو الأداء أو الجودة حقه عالية. So this is the first characteristic. Core features, what's exactly this architecture is designed to solve. ليش أنا جالس أعمل هذا السوفتوير؟ If I'm designing a software for a social media that is dealing mainly about how a user interacting with each other, texting each other, فإيش راح يكون المين core problem اللي جالس أحاول أعملها architectures is texting each other through a network, for example. So we need to define this as well. Second, we have a constraints. Do you have any constraints when you building this software? هل في قيود معينة? Do you require any specific language? Do you have a specific time? Do you have a specific budget? All of those are going to be a constraint. The last one is related to if you requiring anything outside of your softwares, such as إذا الapplication تبعنا, it's requiring to know where is the customer currently is. يعني فين الزبون حاليا موجود for any reason. مثلا المطعم would like to know the customer usually coming from which area. You need to access their location, which is usually gets it from Google the things. But let's assume you having an applications and your application's main function اللي هي core features حقه depending on locations. So I need a GPS. So this is not going to be a part of my software. It is an environment which is external of my applications. طيب we say architectures is that when we're thinking about the architectures, you can have a different architectures. يعني الطريقة التنظيمية للسوفت وير تبعنا ممكن تاخذ أكثر من منحى, different views, and this is what design here when we're having 4+1 module and we're having POS module as well. They're having similar names but different concepts. So I'm going to explain the first part, which is 4+1 module, and I'm going to connect this with when we're building a house, what's the different architecture. So it's going to make sense for you. So لما نجي نرسم الاركتكتشرز الى السوفت وير تبعنا ممكن نحط كل التوجه حقنا how are they logically connecting to each other. ايش هي main functionality, so how they are interacting with each others. All of those I'm just thinking about logically كيف هم مربوطين. So the first view is a logical view. It's dealing with what? The main functional elements and what they are interacting with. Okay? Another view, it's called the process view. ايش المهم بالنسبة لي في process view؟ I'm not taking about the main functionality. ايش هي الأشياء الأساسية اللي جالس تعملها. I'm taking care more about the process, how you gonna to do it. So I need to set an independent executions of a process and how they're gonna to do for runtime. كيف راح أنفذ العمليات? What are the communications between them? The third view is the physical view, which is dealing with how you're gonna to deploy to the operating system. كأجهزة, you're gonna to have a laptop, you may having a server if you're working with a company. How are you gonna to deploy it? كphysical, كأجهزة ملموسة. عندي الآن الابلكيشن كيف راح أرفعه؟ كيف راح أنصبه في الأجهزة؟ I'm going to give you an example here. Deployment, for example, in many cases now, the company they don't have enough storage. ما يكون عندهم storage كافية. فإيش اللي يعتمدوا عليه؟ يعتمدوا على الكلاود. And it's a famous architectures إن الكومباني يكون عندهم part of الداتا بالأجهزة تبعهم عندهم وبارت the huge amount of the data راح يكون في الكلاود. This decision, how we're going to do it, is a deployment. But I'm going to doing a deployment of the software تبعي البارت هذا راح يكون عندي locally in my company, or I'm going to send it to the cloud. So those is going to have a different architectures. طريقة deployment. كيف راح أنصبه في أماكن مختلفة. The last one is development. So are we going to separate my software to a different part? So I'm going to allocate it to a different team to develop it. مثلا, if I have a university system, I'm going to have a part for those who's going to implement the registration, and for those who's going to do the finance, and for those who's doing, I don't know, salaries and so on for the employee. Now أنا عندي هذول الأشخاص أعرف الآن عندي أكثر من development team, عندي أكثر من فريق. طيب كيف راح يشتغلوا مع بعض? How they going to work with each other? What the structure of their working? طريقة عملهم, organization of عملهم. This is what is called a development. Okay. So this is the first architecture's divisions. The second part, which is defined by POS, is they said we're going to have a similar, but we're just going to have a 3. Similar exactly to 4+1, but now we're just going to have a 3, and they're going to give them another name. فمثلا هو هنا سماها module view, هي نفسها حقيقة logical view. So إيش راح تهتم فيها الموديل view؟ main functionality والinteractions. Then we have the component and the connector, هي نفسها البروسيس. هي كيف راح تتم العمليات with the details of as what we said, executions, طريقة التنفيذ. Okay. And the last one, we have an allocation view that describe the mapping between the software and the external environment. So the allocation is related to which one? The development or the physical? Or deployment? I know it's sometimes students just get confused between a deployment with development. الديبلويمنت التوزيع عملية مثلا الرفع، هل راح أحطها أرفعها أنصبها بجهازي ولا خارج؟ deployment. الديفلوبمنت التطوير، how I'm going to design it and analyze it، أكتب الأكواد تبعها. طيب الآن allocation view، هذا يعني عندنا شخصين each of them divided the view in a separated or different naming. So الموديل هي نفسها اللوجيكال، الكومبوننت والكونكتور هي نفسها البروسيس. طيب الالوكيشن يعني توزيع sometimes the resources. It's going to be about what? الفيزيكال، الديبلويمنت ولا الديفلوبمنت؟ What do you think? Okay, it's already there. شكرا سعدية. Exactly. It's a combination. لأن الديبلويمنت أنا كيف راح أنصبه والديفلوبمنت كيف راح أوزع المهام. So الالوكيشن هي I'm gonna to do both. راح أقول إلى التيم أنت مسؤول إنك تطور sorry أنت مسؤول تطور إيش؟ What are you gonna to do? And then when I'm going to deploy it. So الالوكيشن راح تكون a combination for both of them. And what I'm going to show you guys, I'm going to show you association between what I just explained اللي لسه شرحتها الأشياء أساس بس تصير عندكم فكرة خلينا نقول تستوعبوا what I'm talking about. في عملية البناء they have the same things, different architectures، يعني خرائط منوعة، ما يكون عندهم خريطة واحدة بس. فمثلا at the beginning أول ما تجوا تبنوا بيت they're going to give you just a general site plan. Where is the rooms and what is that main things بدون تفاصيل. So this is in our software engineering what we call it logical. We just have the main functionality. Then, when we're going with a more details and how you're going to design it, مين اللي راح يعمل إيش، كيف راح أفصلها. This is going to be development التطوير، هذه آخر واحدة. يعني كيف راح أبني, okay? And then this is actually the first one اللي هي logical. You just have a highlight of the main things. So what is this going to be? When such as the piping, where is the water is going to go? Where is the electricity is going to go? هذا راح تكون أي view. Logical, the process, deployment or development. This is going to be which one? Okay. If we are talking about الhouse, جالسين نتكلم بس عن كيف راح تكتمل عملية the flow of the waters or electricity. This is going to be which one? I'm just going to recall your mind. We have a logical, مش logical ولا قطيناها logical. We already talk about the deployment. راويتكم كيف يعني اللي هي development عفوا. كيف راح أبني البيت هي مش development. طب إيش باقي عندنا كمان؟ That we need to see how they are depending execution كيف راح تتنفذ. البروسيس ممتازة آية. راح تكون هي تخص البروسيس how I'm going to do it. And then this is going to be such as الفيزيكال. لما أجي أتكلم أن أنا فين راح أحط كل شغلة راح أوضح بالضبط إيش هي موجودة عندي راح تكون عندي في الفيزيكال. This is just خلينا نقول تغيير جو عن السوفتوير engineering. We see how it's going to reflect it also in real life, something we usually see. I don't know how many of you saw those plans before, but maybe the blue architectures is more common than the rest. This is how you need to think about it, okay? So those are different architectures. فإحنا راح يكون عندنا architectures بناء على الهدف في النهاية, what we are looking for. Okay, so again, so this is what we just explained. It's just doing it in details, you know. We explaining things that's called the stakeholder. We already said things about the stakeholders. Mainly stakeholders, anyone gonna to interacting with your software. Either the customer, الشخص اللي طلب إنه هو يبني البرنامج, or the one who's gonna to use the user, or third parties who's gonna to benefit of it. So عندنا a lot of stakeholders. طب الآن what's important بالنسبة لنا على هذول الستيكهولدر خصوصا الاركتكتشرز. لما نجي نبني الاركتكتشرز we need to sit with each of those and see what they are concerned. يعني concern what's that's important for them. So each of group of those have a different concern. لما نجي مثلا نتكلم عن end user, لما أبني software, the main concern for the end user is that what's important for me is the usability. قديش السيستم سهل إني أستخدمه. لكن when I'm talking about مثلا manager, what they're gonna to say, the most important for me, the cost to finish it on time. When I'm talking about the administrator مثلا, they concern about how you're gonna to maintain it, how you're gonna to deploy it, and things such as this. So each of those gonna to have a different viewpoints. لهم وجهات نظر مختلفة. It is going to represent the view. So let's see what's the difference between the view and the viewpoint. So the view is how the architecture is dealing with the concern. لما نجي إلى الكونسيرن إلى الكاستمر, المين concern قلنا اليوزابيلتي. مهم بالنسبة له قديش سهل البرنامج إنه يتم استخدامه. So هذا المثال اللي راح نمشي عليه. طب كيف راح أهتم بهذه وجهات النظر اللي هي الكونسير اليوزابيلتي? How I'm going to build an architecture to balance between الكونسيرنز المختلفة إلى الستيكهولدرز. لما يكون عندي المستخدم يبغى اليوزابيلتي عالية, نفس الوقت المانجر would like to have not too much costs. كيف راح أبني عليهم claiming balancing between them؟ هذا راح تكون الفيو. but الفيو points إيش هي؟ a set of conventions and a module appropriate to a particular view. يعني الفيو هي العامة والتفاصيل هي الفيو بوينت. يعني وجهات النظر التفصيلية هي الفيو بوينت. كلهم مع بعض وجهات النظر اللي خاصة إن I need usable, which is part of the stakeholder اللي هو المستخدم. The viewpoints that dealing about I need to take care of the cost is the viewpoint. I'm going to collect all those and I'm going to have a view at the end. فمثلا نرجع إلى الخريطة البيت اللي شفناها قبل شوية. I'm talking about the logical view اللي هي الخريطة الزرقاء. هذه الفيو. هذه الفيو نفسها أساسا هي مبنية build on the viewpoint إلى الهوزبند والوايف لما جلسوا وحددوا إيش الأشياء اللي يبغوها. So الزوج والزوجة كان عندهم viewpoint وجهات نظر. I collect them and I'm going to have a logical view بعدين. You get it? So I have a viewpoint. I'm going to collect the viewpoint as set of the viewpoint to have a view at the end. Architecture review at the end. So if we would like to represent it as a UML, we're going to have an architecture's descriptions, which has many stakeholders. It has a relationships with systems. Each of the stakeholders has one or many concern. عنده اهتمام أو أكثر من اهتمام. Okay. وكل من هذول الكونسيرن actually كل وجهة يعني شغلة معينة يبغوها ممكن إن يتم تمثيلها بواحد أو أكثر من الفيو. So الموضوع الخاص مثلا بالusability, it can be represented في logical, it can be represented في process. So this is how it's going to be dealt with. What I need you to see here that the architecture's description تفاصيل الاركتكتشر، الطريقة التنظيمية إلى برنامجي. It has a so it has an aggregation هنا. إيش يعني aggregation؟ has a. So الاركتكتشر description has a viewpoint. الاركتكتشر description has a view. So that's what it's representing here. Okay. So that's about the first part of today's lectures. Any questions about it? Okay, clear. Thank you. So now I will talk about reused. Reused is a very simple and a nice example that you can think about it in a daily life حقيقة. Let's assume we have this example later, so I'm going to choose the same example to avoid the multi examples. You are a company who's building a cars. Are you going to build a card every time from scratch? No. Sometimes you have the machines, the engines, the same machines. You're going to have it again and again. Sometimes you change it based on a customer or based on which car module you're going to put it on, and so on and so forth. But you're going to have a windows, you're going to have a doors, you're going to have all those, you're going to have a wheels. So all of those, it's going to be reused again. طيب ليش فينا نستخدم reused? For many reasons. We need, just give me a second. Sorry. Okay, so why we get to have a reuse? To avoid a duplication. بدل ما أعيد الأشياء in several time, I'm gonna يسموها, we will say it في the next unit اللي هي الcomponent والservice. Sometimes we say it in on shelf, يعني شغلات خلاص تكون جاهزة. أنا ما كنت أتخيل الآن أنكم جالسين تشتغلوا بشركة. Again, المثال اللي استخدمناه from the beginning of unit 1. You're working with a company. You design a software for the Arab Open University, which has a registration, finance, all those requirements. خلصتوا المشروع كله. جاتكم جامعة ثانية. You're not going to start things from scratch. راح تستخدموا شغلات كثيرة. You're going to use it again. So now we avoiding duplication. Instead of, I know registration, that's already dead with the Arab Open University. I'm going to do it with XYZ University. So I'm going to use it again. And then the second reason, the prompt reliability, because the developer can try and test solution. الآن لو أنتوا تشتغلوا ممكن مثلا خلينا نقول في مشروع التخرج. أول ما تشتغلوا في شغلة, you may spend too much time doing it. تقضوا وقت طويل وأنتوا تعملوها. And you will face an issue, solve it, fix it. Get an issue, solve it, or you find the bugs or improve it. Now next time لو أنتوا بتعملوا development the same things, are you going to do the same mistake? No, لأنكم you already learn. So this is what's called reliability. أي شغلة تعلمتوها trusted solution أنتوا تعلمتوا لما جيتوا تبنوا الفاينل project, عندكم database and you would like to connect with the database. أول مرة ما كنتوا عارفين كيف تعملوا connections. You tried it, واجهتوا مشاكل, and you fix it. لما تيجوا تعملوا another project, you will know direct solution كيف إنكم تعملوا connection to a database. So reliability, I'm sure what I'm gonna to do is correct. The speed development, again, the same, related to the first one. You're not gonna to do things from scratch. Already تعلمنا وخلصنا and we know what's the mistake, so it's gonna to speed up the process. And the mechanisms of speeding a good practice. إيش يعني good practice? الآن لو أنتوا تشتغلوا على مشروع التخرج and you are the one who is starting designing the part related how you're going to connect with the database. وتعلمتوا عملتوها good. You sit with other colleagues, جالسين مع زملائكم, and tell them this is not the good way to doing it in that way. So this is what's called a good practice. So spare it out. تجلسي مع زميلاتك تعلمين تقول لهم لا هذه الطريقة مش صحيحة. الطريقة الصحيحة, this is how you're going to do it. And this is actually what it's nowadays we see it everywhere, such as في GitHub or any other platform that's people usually develop something and they share their experience. يشاركوا إيش تجاربهم. So this is going to benefit of having a reused. طيب إيش الأشياء اللي ممكن نعمل لها reused؟ إيش الأشياء اللي ممكن نعيد استخدامها exactly؟ Plenty of things we can do. We can reuse the component, which is we're going to explain next week. We can reuse the requirements. I'm going to explain it now. We can reuse the analysis. We can use the architectures with design with audience. The architectures with design, this is explaining in this unit. The components in the next unit. And then a requirement, I'm going to tell you what it is. So ما راح ناخذها كلها بالتفصيل. I'm just going to explain it as what we have it here. So software components راح تكون عندي بعض المحتويات من الsystems as a full components ready, such as the payment. So if I always using the payable in my system as a component كاملة, مش فقط عملية الكود. And I already having how the payable connecting to the website, and I know how I'm gonna to get the information of the customer as a component of the payment. It's ready. لما أجي أبني e-commerce ثانية, I'm gonna to use the same component. Okay, so this is when we having the component. And to already used a component ready during the object oriented during the Java. The create a component can إيش كان عندنا في الجافا, we can call it a component and we reuse it again and again. إيش عندنا مثال كان? We had a library such as مثلا كان عندنا الماث library. So على أساس إن إحنا مش كل مرة we gonna to design الماث, we have الماث as اللي هي library as a component and we reuse it. الآن لو نيجي نتكلم عن الhouse example, sometimes we gonna to have a pre-made window or a pre-made door, فنجي فقط ناخذها ونستخدمها. Again, what we call it on shelf, راح يكون عندنا زي في الرف يسموها, we just gonna to use it. Another type اللي هي requirement patterns. Requirement patterns أنا عندي سلسلة من المتطلبات usually it's repeating in the same things in illustrations of requirements. يعني أنا راح أساساً ضمنياً أعرفها even before I started. So for example لما يكون عندي زبون إلى الإي-كوميرس and I know those who's asking to design e-commerce website, they're gonna to ask for having an account. They ask for a main pages who's have a main product, and they will ask for a page that has a favorite product or most sale products الأكثر مبيعاً, and usually they asking for promotions part, and at the end they will put it in the basket. So I know the pattern of requirement, طريقة تكرر المتطلبات أنا عارفها. So I'm going to reuse it من البداية. So I'm going to have a checklist. And I have a checklist of each domains I am going to work on it. And then this is lead us again to analysis platforms. Analyzing the patterns. So I know now the requirement pattern. أنا عارفة إيش اللي راح يطلبها إلى الويب سايت تبعه. طريقة تحليلي أنا, how I'm going to analyze it, it is going to follow the same patterns based on the concept. Let me give you an example of نرجع إلى البيت مثلا. So I have a couple who's coming to me asking to build a house. جايين يطلبوا بيت. أنا من تحليلي usually I know those who's having a big family, such as let's say 5 kids, usually with requiring a big backyard playing rooms and XYZ as analyzing, and I can analyze the requirements in more appropriate way لأن أنا عارف الباترن تبعي. So نفس الانالايزد راح استخدمه إلى أي شخص عنده عائلة ويجي من البيت. The same things when we're talking about the software. So I always know that الuniversity عادة عندها set of things that's going to change later, such as مثلا ال prerequisite إنهم يغيروها, and usually it's depending on the size of the university. عدد الطلاب، إذا عدد الطلاب عالي ممكن إنهم يطلبوا ال availability, so ال bandwidth اللي تكون على الجهاز تكون عالية, and so on and so forth. So this is an analyzing patterns. The architecture patterns, we're going to use a different series of systems. راح نتكلم عن بالتفصيل، راح ناخذ أنواع مختلفة من architectures. So the same architectures can be modified based on a need, but we can reuse it. الأخيرة أو اللي قبل الأخيرة اللي هي design patterns. Again هذه كمان راح نغطيها، فإحنا راح نغطي الآن architectures with design patterns. Most likely design pattern راح نخليها next lectures. Design patterns طريقة التصميم. So for example, one of the patterns we're going to study is الادابتر. لما نحط الفيشة في الكهرباء اللي هي البلس ان للكهرباء as an adapters, this is the design. طريقة تصميمها كيف صمموها؟ إن it has to be has a rounded, it has to be إن تكون مخططة. How they going to design it? This is the design. So the patterns of these adapters, it can be reused. نفس التصميم ممكن نستخدمه إلى فيشات مختلفة. Okay, so this is how we're going to reuse its design patterns. Items is just a small part of a particular such as a language. An example من المثال تبعنا اللي جالسين نمشي عليه اللي هي مثلا في الإي-كوميرس filtration as just a small part إنه يكون فيها drop down ويطلع لي أسماء المنتجات. So this is not a component drop down, مش component كاملة. It's not an analysis, it's not a requirement. هي فقط جزء بسيط. So I'm just going to use this part for how we're going to have the drop down. راح استخدمها في أكثر من website. Okay. So this is about reused. Now we're going to talk about the architecture style, and this is what I just said. One of level of reused مستوى إعادة الاستخدام هي إعادة استخدام architectures. Okay. So a part of the level of reused is reusing the architectures. So before we reuse the architectures, we need to understand the different architectures style. So we're having 9 architecture styles. We already explaining 2 of them, which is the peer-to-peer with data flow. We're going to see the rest of them. So let's take a look to each separately. أول architectures طريقة إلى كيف راح أربط الإليمنت عندي, which is called the client server. This is a very famous one actually. So the client server, أنا عندي server and everyone connecting with this server to do a certain operations. So I have a server who respond to any request of the client. So the server doesn't request anything from the client. The server ما يطلب شيء من الكلاينت. الكلاينت هو اللي يطلب request والسيرفر بناء على هذا الريكوست راح يعمل respond. So I have a server اللي جالس ينتظر ما يعمل ولا شيء waiting for request from the client. Whenever it's received a request راح يعمل process and is going to return a respond. Okay. مثال عليها مين؟ الإيميل server. So all of us having an email. في عندنا email server where we having all our emails there. We connecting with a server to send email, reading email, whatever. We sending a request to Gmail مثلا أو إلى Microsoft if you're using the Outlook. They're going to give us a response based on your request. So this is an example. Now, what you need to know for those architectures, you need to understand each of those how they are work, and you need to know an example. Example such as مثل لما we're dealing with a requirement. Either you can have an example and ask to categorize it, it's going to be under which style, or giving you a scenario and said this is going to be which architectures. Okay, so let's say what's an example of the client server, such as when we have the browser, such as the email server, such as the online banking systems. You have a bank system that you are connecting with them, and they're going to give you whatever you're asking for. Okay. Another style is a call return. This is, you know it from the Java. You have a you have a method, and you have another method. They interacting with each other. They're using each other sometimes by invoking المناداة. كل method تنادي الميثود الثاني. This is what is called call return. So if you مثلا إذا عندي method اسمها sum, it is going to take two arguments. So I'm going to have sorry, it's going to have two arguments, two elements. راح أرسل لها رقمين x و y. إيش راح تعمل هذا الميثود؟ راح تجمعهم مع بعض and it's going to return a sum. راح ترجع لي المجموع تبعهم. So what I have here is the style of call return. So I call a method اللي اسمها sum. I already invoking, sending information about what are the number, and it's going to doing اللي هو colors is going to do a calculation and it's going to return a result for me. An example, when we're having full object-oriented method, when we're having a method that's invoking, sending a message to another, okay? A third style is a layered. So I have, instead of just call and return, I have a different layer. Let me show you the diagrams and I'm going to explain based on it. For the call and return, you have one call and it's going to it's going to invoke something, return something. The same things with the client server directly. A different layer represents than when you're having a different concept that you cannot reach the one on the top, such as if you're having a service in the systems, you cannot access the one on the top until you go through all the layers in the middle. You see what I mean? So if you're having a bottom layers خدمة موجودة تحت، أنت ما تقدر تطلع إلى السيرفيس اللي موجودة بالأعلى until you go through all these services. So this is what is the layer representation. So let's back to the explanation here. They said structures are a series of layers that stuck in top each others. So usually you cannot go to another layer immediately. Okay? مثال عليها, example, when we're having the Java programs, if you would like to execute it, usually you're having a virtual machine, making call to service, it's connecting to the operating system. You don't go directly to the operating system. So there's a different layer. And another example, the client server, sometimes it can call the layer, but you're just going to have a specific type of layer. So من الأنواع الخاصة, specific type of layer is the client server architectures. ليش? Because it's going to have two layers. So let's back to client server. We can count this as this is the one layer and this is the second layer. Okay, basically. The fourth type is peer-to-peer. We already explained this, but I'm just going to see if any of you used before a website that's using a terminal, like a website to downloading videos shared among people together. Did any of you use Turnet and websites? أساس تنزيل الأفلام. في عندكم مواقع تكون it's not storing الفيديو في السيرفر that it's using peer-to-peer. Any of you used it before? Know what it's called? The video streaming, anyone? Music streaming. Turnet, exactly, Amina. And this can be a question. What is Turnet representations architectures? So it's going to peer-to-peer. Let me explain how it's works. So if I have Turnet or streaming music, they said, I have a movie. This movie is too big. Okay, الحجم اللي حق هذا الفيلم كبير. So instead of I store it in my PC, I don't have enough storage. I'm gonna to store a part. Let's assume only 3 parts. Part with me, part with Amina, and part with Lina. Now we having access. عندنا seed. أنا عارفة each part is gonna to be inside which with whom. موجود مع مين. فيجي الناس يدخلوا على الموقع. They click download to the movie XYZ. What's it happen later? They can then collect part A from me, part 2 from Amina, part 3 from Lina, put it together, and then you get to watch it. So this is a very famous architectures for the peer-to-peer. الناس بدل ما يخزنوا في جهازهم يوزعوا الميوزك أو يوزعوا الموفي، كل واحد يحفظ جزء بجهازه and then you can go download it. It's not stored anywhere. حقيقة هو مقسم ومخزن في أجهزة الناس and it's just going to collect them based on a metadata. Okay, so this is the peer-to-peer. Then we're going to have a data flow, which is I already explained. Let me just double check if I didn't cover any of those stuff. So an object, we're going to have style of components, an object, small independent sub-programs, which is we call them filter. They have a communication between them, and it's going to be unidirectional. That's using fictional. هذه البايب هي fictional ثابتة. كيف إنهم راح يتواصلوا مع بعضهم to feed the next things. So each filter has no knowledge of what other filter upstream or downstream. يعني أنا الآن إذا في المثال اللي شفناه من قبل على أساس إني أوجد إيش هي الكلمات that end up with the UM. I don't care and I have no idea what the previous filter did to filter the words that's starting with a P. Okay, so this is what does it mean. Okay. So this type of architecture is commonly used في Unix. تستخدم كثير. Usually we have it نستخدمها في something very popular عندنا في IT. You supposed to know it اللي هي API Application Programming Interface. إيش يعني Application Programming Interface? Sometimes you're using another part of something and you don't need to deal with the detail. You just need to benefit from it. خليني أعطيكم a recent well-known example. الآن عندنا ال AI اللي هي Generative AI الذكاء الاصطناعي التوليدي مثل الشات جي بي تي. If you إن شاء الله دخلتوا على مشروع التخرج you design an application and you would like to use the AI. Are you going to design an AI module? بتجوا أنتوا بتطوروا ال AI module؟ لا. You're going to use ال API. الآن حقيقة أنتوا لو ما تدخلوا على حسابكم بالشات جي بي تي هي ما تدخلوا على الشات جي بي تي على ال Open AI there is an option for APIs. So there is a key. You're going to get that key doing some things. You're going to put it in your code and you don't need to write any things about ال AI module كيف هي انبنت. You just get to use it. This is exactly what it's mean here. You have no knowledge how an AI is going to design, but you're just gonna choose the API كواجهة as an interfaces of that API module in your applications. We're going to have a data center. This is the sixth style. A data center dealing with how we're going to store our data. So we're going to have different type of elements and the relationships between them. The point is we're going to have a two form of data center. راح نشرحهم الآن. We have many clients. Those clients would like to get information of the data center, to store something on it, to return something, to create some things. So all of this related to data and the client need to access it. So we need to centralize everything. The center store may be duplicated or avoid the backup in case of failure or to deal with greater value of a client's request. What is that sentence mean? حقيقة اللي يعني هذا sentence but it's can doing a lecture on it. But let me telling you it quickly. الآن do you accept أنكم you access the SIS and you see all the courses and all your payments is gone? No, you accept that it's everything's supposed to be there always. طب كيف الشركات تعتمد أن let's assume there is a failure في مشكلة صارت في السيستم down hacker whatever reason وراحت المعلومات. What is the solution of something happen? They can do a backup. لكن to avoid doing a backup usually is too expensive. تكون عالية المصاريف. In some cases we can do a duplication. And instead of having only one table, we get to have it some of parts to avoid a backup in this case. Again, I'm just going to explain it quickly. It's just in case you get a question on it. The communication channels always fixed. ما راح تتغير في الداتا. We have two types of data center architectures. One is called a database المشهورة اللي انتم عارفينها. And one called Blackboard. What's the difference between those? For database, you initialized everything's coming from the client. You as a client, you're asking for a query and you get a response. That's it. So database is just a repository, فقط مخزن يخزن فيها المعلومات. However, we have the Blackboard. It has a data, لكن it's interaction. يعني request it can be starting from the client and sometimes it's starting from a database. such as إيش؟ الستوك database. الداتابيس الخاصة في الأسهم. So it's sometimes it's changing the price, it's changing the amounts, whatever. So sending things to the clients. The clients again requesting things. So في بعض الأنظمة عندنا it doesn't work properly. The architectures that is rely on a database is not fit with their need. لازم يستخدموا Blackboard when متى نستخدم Blackboard? When you need an interaction between a data and the client. You need data to send initialized a request to the client. We're going to use Blackboard. We have a seventh style, which is an independent component. An independent component sending is just a messages. So for independent component, I have a different process. Each process requesting something and sending a messages to another. Okay, so I have an for example, I have an e-commerce website that it has a micro process. يعني عنده في الاي-commerce فيها خدمات مفصولة such as I have a part for doing the favorites of the client as the microservices كخدمة مصغرة موجودة في السيستم تبعي. As a favorite, I'm going to send the message to baskets at the end of doing something. So as a process, I'm going to do something, or I have something, and I'm just going to send a message. I'm not going to ask for details. I'm just going to tell them. So it's just a message. This is called independent component. Independent components يعني كل واحد ما يعتمد على الثاني. أنت أرسلت لي message أو ما أرسلت لي message, I can't complete my task. So this is just how it's going to be different than the others. It's not rely on them. So okay. So an example of settled components may be controlling different part of chemical processing plants, that it's you having a part, it's sending a message to another with على the process at the end. Okay. Service oriented. Service oriented. Nowadays, it's a very famous and a well-known company اللي هي Amazon. I don't know, I'm going to explain it because we don't have so much time, and I'm going to explain it next week. So I'm not going to copy it and show it on the website. راح أشرحها وأفصلها لما نجي نتكلم عن السيرفيسز. So مثلا عندنا موقع Amazon. It's providing a set of services, مجموعة من الخدمات. So the service oriented, it's having a kind of customers and البروفايدر. الكاستمرز الشخص اللي يبغى، والبروفايدر الخدمات اللي راح يقدمها اللي هو in my example اللي هي مثلا امازون. Let me show you diagrams to explain on it. So I have the customers who's going to enter the website اللي حق الامازون and pick up from this. In some cases I don't sometimes have only one provider. عندي أكثر من مزود للخدمة، راح يقدموا لي أكثر من خدمة وأنا راح أختار منهم. المثال, let me use something maybe more related to, especially nowadays. مثلا سلة. سلة has more than one client اللي هم المستخدمين اللي حنا جايين نشتري, and more than one provider وهم يقدموا خدمات عليها. So they're providing different services. في عندنا providers مش فقط selling products. سلة ممكن هي أكثر من أن هي السيرفيس، أن هي تقدم خدمات مبيعات فقط، فالمثال مش كثير قريب. راح أعطيكم المثال الأقرب اللي هو لما نجي نتكلم عن السيرفيسز. But what you need to think about it, I have a different provider, أكثر من مقدم للخدمة، مزود إلى الخدمة. They're gonna to have it on a service bus. Then later, the customer, they can access it all, okay? The point here, they all connecting through what? Standard communication protocol. يعني مش بكيفهم يختاروا كيف راح يتواصلوا مع بعض. We have a connections, but it's going to be standard. And they connecting through an enterprise services bus, which is the ESP, okay? A ninth style اللي هي notifications. Notifications, I believe most of you already saw this icon. I added here so you can recall what it is. اللي هي يسموها RSS. Okay, so RSS اللي هي notifications. You going to our website, you click on that RSS to say what does it mean. اللي هي really simple standardizations or a rich style summary, I believe, rich style summary. So that's usually you're gonna to tell the website, I need to know if you have any new informations, please send it to me. So لما يكون عندهم مثلا تدخل على الويب سايت يقول لك لما يكون عندك خصومات send me a notifications. So this type of communications, it's called notification. ايش المين element فيها؟ We have subscribers اللي هو احنا، وعندنا الpublishers الويب سايت. Whenever you're having new items, they're gonna to tell us the update. لكن before this, they're not gonna to send us any updates if we didn't register. احنا في البداية لازم نسجل. So whenever they're having a new update, they're gonna to send us the new updates, okay? طيب we have a new concept which is اللي هي الفريمورك والبرودكت line. And I believe I'm going to stop. So this is going to be the last things we're going to talk about it today. The framework is having a larger part of the system. أكبر من الاركتكتشرز. يعني أنا ممكن يكون عندي architectures واحد. لو نجي نرجع إلى example that when we having a house, you can have only one plan, خريطة واحدة. ممكن يكون عندنا أكثر من خريطة. الاركتكتشر is just going to represent one of you. لكن الفريمورك is a bigger part of the systems. So reuse a large part of الاركتكتشرز. راح استخدم جزء مرة كبير من الاركتكتشرز and I'm call it the framework. مثال عليها something you use it في الجافا to represent the graphical user interface. ايش استخدمته في الجافا to represent the graphical user interface؟ تذكرين؟ في الجافا آخر يونتس أساس أنكم كنتوا دائما تكتبوا الأكواد وتطلعوها exactly. شكرا سعدية. Java FX. So Java FX actually it was called or it was used as it's called swing. So السوينج أو الجافا FX هم framework. Okay. Before كان اسمها swing حاليا نستخدمها as a Java FX. إيش وظيفة هذا الفريمورك؟ It's going to give us all the components need to having a graphical user interface. So this is what we call framework. طيب الكونسبت اللي بعده اللي product lines as الexample اللي أعطيتكم فيها في البداية. If you having a motor, if you would like to build a car, you are not going to doing things in a random order. You have a line. What are you going to start with? Are you going to have a window first? Are you going to have an engine first? And how are you going to put them in each other's? So the manufacturing, how is going to go? This is going to called the product lines. So the process of the product lines is contains 8 stages. Is starting with the product line initialization. بإيش راح أبدأ؟ طيب كيف راح أبدأ أساساً تصنيع خلينا نفترض based on example اللي حطيناه كيف راح أبدأ تصنيع السيارة. So the product line initialization, how I'm going to start. I'm going to domain analyze. طيب I'm going to talk to a design or I'm going to build a car. I need to analyze what I need from this domain. Later I'm going to specify what's my architectures. And if you recall, the architecture specifications affected by what? The twin what? Twin peaks. الاركتكتشرز الآن حنا حق خط التصنيع على أساس إن حنا نصنع to finishing the things to release at the end. The first step is initialized. راح نبدأ. راح نعرف what we are talking about domain analyzing and then we have an architecture specification. The architecture specification affected by what? متأثرة بمين؟ بالlevel of the details in what? When I have specification of the architectures related to a level of details of what? First slides اللي شرحتهم في البداية. Levels of what? Requirement. شكرا سعدية. So level of requirements. So لما يكون عندي high level of requirements, I will have a more specifications. So I'm gonna to a third stage راح تكون an architecture specification. Then I have a component collection. Now I know that I need these components. I'm gonna to put them together. I'm gonna to specify more requirements. So when you specify a requirement more, that means you having what? Higher requirements. يعني تفاصيل أكثر. I'm just going to use. This is the last thing, so don't worry. We will end up soon. I have the architecture specification. And if you recall what we said here, you have the specification. It's to start small. When you're having a low detail of requirements. When you go to higher, the specification will increase. You will have more specification. So if we back here to our slide, you say you have architecture specification. Then you're going to have a requirements specifications requirements. That means we're going to increase level. راح يكون عندنا معلومات أكثر. الآن we're going to update the architecture specifications. راح يكون عندنا specifications more. It's like a sandwich. So you have an architecture. You increase the requirements. You will update the architectures again. So that's what you're going to have. Then you get to use the component specification. You get a component at the beginning. عرفنا إن إحنا we need a window, we need an engine, we need a door. Now, when I go with the specification, I know for this module إلى نوع السيارة هذا الخاصة بالشكل هذا الخاص أنا أحتاج نافذة بهذا النوع بالضبط. So I'm going to go to component specification, and finally it's going to be released. Okay. So this is what we get to stop on today. We finish the architectures. What we get to do next, which is after Ramadan, inshallah, we get to do a reuse